Hello everyone and welcome to another episode in my Saab 900 restoration project. This video will encompass the biggest restoration job that we've ever done on this channel, as we are going to do a full refresh on both the engine and gearbox. In the previous episode we determined that the original engine that came with my Saab wasn't looking very healthy, so together with you guys' help I was looking for a new way forward. I decided that the first thing that I want to try is to open up the 16 valve engine out of my parts car, as it might be our salvation. All my friends, hey guys, so I'm still working on which engine I'm going to be putting in my Saab, more specifically which block we are going to use, and I haven't really made a decision yet, but what I have decided is that I want to be opening up my 16 valve. If you remember, this is the engine that came out of my grey donor Saab, because I do want to have a look inside to get an overall impression of its health, and that might help me decide which engine I will be using. As you can see, I already started with taking this thing apart. For example, the intake manifold was taken off together with the fuel rail. I also took off some coolant hoses, and I've put it on my engine stand. That way it's a bit easier to work on it. So yeah, we are just going to continue with stripping everything down on the cylinder head, and then we're going to have a look inside of the cylinders. Okay, so I am afraid that this engine suffers from the same issues as my other one, being that there is a bunch of surface rust on the cylinder walls. Particularly cylinder number 1 and 4 have been affected. And although it is not as bad as my other block, it is enough for me to be kind of put off by using this. I could go ahead and disassemble everything, hone the cylinders and then hope for the best, but I don't think I would get the result that I'm looking for. So I am afraid that that is engine number 2 that we are not going to be using. I'm sorry, a 16 valve swap will not be in the cards. So yeah, this will be listed up for sale. I'm going to cry and drink myself to sleep tonight, not necessarily in that order, and then tomorrow we are going to look for a solution. Okay, so now let's quickly take a look at this gearbox. If you remember, a couple of episodes ago I took this out of my donor Saab because it is a 5-speed. That is why I want to use it. It was looking very bad, pretty disgusting, so that is why I took it to work to get it completely aquablasted. And then it was looking nice and fresh, but I decided to take out all of the covers, the inner drivers and the differential to get all of the hardware zinc coated again, and we're also going to re-gasket it. And I just took delivery of my new gasket kit, and also I started sorting through all of the zinc coated hardware that is laying here. It already took me a couple of hours to sort through all of this stuff, but finally I've got everything for the gearbox at least. So yeah, let's start with that. Let's start with this cover. Okay, next cover. Next is the drive chain cover. The lid with a new seal. Wow. Perfect. Next I'm going to put in the diff. Now we're going to take a look at the inner drivers. These basically sit on the side of the gearbox with this spline into the differential, and then this goes to the drive shafts. And there is an oil seal here in the middle that we are going to be changing, and an O-ring here. So yeah, let's take it apart, and it is important that these shims stay with the right inner driver. You can see that there is a clip deep down there and that we need to take out. Like so. And now I'm going to use one of these pullers to press the spline out. And this is the oil seal that we're going to take out. And let's pop out the oil seal. Junk. Okay, so before we start reassembling everything, I quickly want to talk about these inner drivers. There are actually two styles, an older and a new style, and depending on which one you have to match it with the newer or older style drive shaft. The gearbox in particular that we're working on right now has the newer style, so I would need to take off the drive shafts off my grey Saab to make this work. And that was actually the plan, especially looking at this inner driver. It looks in pretty good shape, so this is definitely reusable. But I'm afraid that the story is different when we take a look at the one from the other side. This inner driver is showing some pretty deep divots inside of the mating areas, which would result in a lot of clunking noises and play on the drive shafts. So this would definitely need to be replaced, but I've got another plan. Instead of just replacing one inner driver, I'm actually going to be replacing both of them by two of these older style inner drivers. I stole these off my original 4-speed gearbox and they are still in excellent reusable condition. So that solves my wear issue, and they have the added benefit that I can also reuse the original drive shafts that were in the car. I'm not entirely sure that this will work, but I'm keen to give it a go. So first, the new oil seal. And now the clip. Beautiful. And then lastly, the new O-ring. And that is job done. So that is both of them done. Now let's install. All of that feels good, so now we've just got a few more things to do. This is where the shifter connects to, and here there is an oil seal that we're going to replace. Done. And then lastly we're going to mount a diff cover, and this seems like some kind of filter, I don't know. But it seems like there is a lot of junk trapped behind it, so we're quickly going to pop that off. That is everything cleaned out, so let's pop it back in. Well guys, that is the gearbox completely done, and I have to say that I am super stoked with how clean it came out, especially knowing where we started from. It was looking very disgusting. So it is looking the part, and it is all sealed up, so I hope it is going to serve me well once it is mounted underneath of the engine and into the car. And speaking of the engine, we are going to focus on that for the remainder of this video, and I've actually bought a new engine block, so let's go take a look at that. This is my house and replace. Okay everyone, so this is the engine that is going to go into my Saab. It is another B201 engine. I'll quickly show you the engine code right over there. So that means that it is an 8 valve again, but it is a bit more modern than my previous engine, and you can spot that by one, I think the red color, but also the location of the starter motor underneath of the intake manifold instead of the exhaust manifold. I think also the oil pump was changed, and I was also told that the chain tensioner used to fail on these older engines, but these ones should be a bit better. And speaking of the distribution chain, we've got this nice chain guide here. That is something that I was looking for, and having a nice example like this really solved that issue. But the main reason why I bought this engine was for the cylinder walls, of course, and as you can see there are some very nice crisscross honing marks on there, so they look pretty good. So that means that my main issues all have been solved, but there is actually a bonus, and that is this cylinder head, because when I was taking this apart I noticed that it has been resurfaced very recently. That is a big plus, and also the camshaft looked way healthier than the one on the cylinder head that I refurbished in the previous episode. So it might actually be worth it to do the same to this cylinder head and use that instead of the other one. So yeah, let's start with that and take this apart completely. And now the lifters. Now let's take out the valves using this valve spring compressor. If it feels stuck, I just give it a quick tap and then usually it comes loose. And now comes the fun part, finagling out the valve locks. That's one, and that's two. The valve guides feel very good, and the valve seat also doesn't look too bad. So that is the cylinder head completely disassembled. Tomorrow I'm going to take that to work and get it completely aquablasted, so the next time you're going to see this it will be absolutely spotless. And voila, here we have our perfectly clean cylinder head. And I have to say that the vapor honer knocked it out of the park again. It looks absolutely spotless, and I am super grateful to be able to use a machine like that for jobs like this. Because yeah, at home it's just impossible to attain a result like this. If any of you are interested in getting something like this done yourself, I'm going to leave some information in the description below, and then you can get a quote. Other than that, I've also cleaned up some of these camshaft parts, and I've also cleaned up the valves, and they came out very nice as well. And before I'm going to pop these back in, we are going to be lapping them, just in the same fashion as in the previous video. So yeah, if you are interested in how I did that, please check out that video, because now I am going to go over it pretty quickly. Lapping the valves was the last thing that we needed to do, so now let's reassemble the cylinder head. The cylinder head is done for now. I am going to put in the camshaft as soon as this is sitting on top of the engine block. So we are going to let that rest here in the corner of things that are done. And we're going to move on to the block itself. Also, don't mind the Civic that I just bought. That is for some other time. I'm pretty much completely going to disassemble this thing, and we're going to start with the oil pump. And now the water pump. The timing chain cover. Here we have the chain guide. That was the part that I was looking for in the previous episode. And if we take a look here, this is the one that I took off my original engine. and I think it's clear that this one looks a little bit happier. Let's take off the chain. And one more guide. I don't really know what this is, but it's coming off. I think now is a good time for a bit of the greasing. As you can see, I've also started stripping some of the paint away because of course we're going to do a respray. But now we're first going to take out the pistons and the crankshaft. Some signs of wear. Piston number 4. Piston number 3. And here we have number 2. And here is the last one. And now we'll take out the crank. And here we go. Well guys, it has been 1 week since I've been working on this engine and that is because I ran into some issues. It seems like that is a bit of a trend on this channel. I wanted to prepare the engine for paint, and usually one of the first things that I do is to clean off all of the gasket materials. And I was doing the head gasket when I noticed that there was a bunch of rust around the coolant channels in the block. And it was that bad that I was afraid that the head gasket wouldn't seal off properly. So after a lot of thinking, I decided that yeah, the block needed to be machined, and today I took delivery of it again. So as you can see, this entire surface has been decked, so it feels nice and smooth and it should be perfectly flat. 95% of the rust pitting is gone. There are only these black stains remaining, which is some residual rust that embedded itself into the surface. But it is only visually that you can register them, you can't really feel them, so I think for a mating surface that should do just fine. It was possible to get out all of these imperfections, but that would mean that we would have to take much more material, and I was afraid that in doing so we might run into some clearance issues or maybe too high of a compression. So that is why we left it like this, but I am sure that this will work just fine. I found a local guy that did this for me. He was really nice to work with and his prices were very reasonable. So if any of you are looking for some machine work, I will leave his details here somewhere on the screen or in the description below. So now we are going to continue with painting the block. I've already stripped away all the paint that I wanted to remove, so we can go straight into masking it off and prepping the surface. Well, now that the engine has been completely painted and cleaned out, I think it is time to start putting it back together, which is really exciting. Over here I laid out all of the parts from the bottom end, and I've also given all of them a clean. You can also spot that I polished the journals on the crankshaft, just like I did on the crankshaft in the previous episode. So if you are wondering how I did that, I would suggest you check out the previous episode. I've also cleaned the pistons, they are good to go, and we have a fresh looking oil pump, so all of this stuff is good to go. And then over here I ordered a load of parts over at R&D Carparts. They are a specialized store for Saab and Volvo parts, and they basically had everything in stock that I need to complete this build. For example, these are the bearings for the crankshaft and the rods. Here we have a full gasket kit and stuff like a new fuel pump. So all of the ingredients are here, so let's start throwing this thing back together. First step, the crank bearings. And some pre-lube. And now let's drop in the crank. Next up are these two very important bearings, as they manage the amount of axial play that the crankshaft has. And now the main caps. And now let's chuck in the pistons. No. Now I'm going to torque everything. And now the rods. Beautiful. Next we're going to reassemble the timing chain side. First the tensioner. Chain guide number 1. The timing chain. and tensioner number 2. With the timing chain installed, I'm going to put on some new gaskets and then the cover can go on. Then the oil pump mounts here. Here we have our oil pump, and before we're going to plop it back into position, we're going to change both the O-ring and the crankshaft seal. And now the new seal. I've already installed the new O-ring and now I'm quickly oiling up the pump before we put in the gears. There is actually a check that you can do on these pumps to make sure that they aren't too worn, and that is done by removing the O-ring and then putting a straight edge onto the housing of the pump and then measuring with a feeler gauge in between of that straight edge and the gears, and that way you can see how much they have worn. But I've already done that on this pump and it was just fine, so it can go on the engine. And now we'll slide in the crank pulley. This is where the water pump goes. And the pulley. My next goal is to mount the cylinder head, but before I can do that, we're going to have to take the entire block off the engine stand, because first I need to install this plate. This goes right here over the crankshaft. This is the crankshaft seal. But over here there's a little surface that also gets covered by the head gasket and the cylinder head, so this needs to be installed first. It took some help from my dad to get the engine laid down here on the cart, and now you can see that we have enough room to mount our backing plate together with a new gasket and a new crankshaft seal. Okay. And now I'm temporarily going to put on the flywheel because we're going to use its marks to set the timing on the timing chain. So I guess now we are ready to throw on the head gasket and then the cylinder head. And now we're going to torque the bolts in two stages. The first one is at 60 Newton meters. That's stage 1. And now stage 2 is at 100. And that's the last one. Whew. That is looking beautiful, and now next we're going to throw in the camshaft. Okay, and now the last thing that we need to do before the flywheel can come off again, so that we can put it on the engine stand again, is to take off this gear and put on the timing chain. Okay. I think I'm a tooth off. Yeah, that should be it. That is that. Now let's give it a spin and hopefully we don't bend any valves. After turning the engine over a couple of times, I lined up the timing mark for the camshaft again. And then if we take a look at the one here at the crankshaft, that is also lining up perfectly. So our engine should be perfectly timed now. So I can take the flywheel off again and then we'll put this thing on the engine stand. Here we are, and something to note is that I also checked the valve clearance on this cylinder head. And contrary to the other one that we checked in the previous episode, all the valve clearances here are perfect according to spec. So we can continue building onwards. Let's start with the fuel pump. Next I'm going to put on the intake manifold. The oil filter housing is going to go on temporarily because in the future we're going to have to pull it off to fill up the oil pump through here once we're going to do the first start. And this is the cleaned up thermostat housing with a new gasket. And now the fresh valve cover. And now the distributor with a new O-ring. This is where the alternator support mounts to. Oh no, mistakes were made. Lastly, I also attached the exhaust manifold, so I think for now that we are done with messing with the engine, and now we can work on getting it mated with our refreshed gearbox. I have already laid down the gasket that needs to go in between of the engine and the gearbox, and as you can see it is a metal one. But we can't simply throw the engine on top of this. My repair manual actually states that we need to use some kind of sealant or adhesive to really seal off the surface. And for that I got recommended this Loctite 518 stuff that should work perfectly. But my manual doesn't say if it needs to go on top or underneath of the gasket, so I'm just going to wing it and put it on both sides. Oh yeah, shit. Oops, I forgot about this. Well guys, that is probably the biggest project that we've ever done on this channel finalized, and here is the result. Well, I think that result speaks for itself. I am over the moon with how clean it looks, and I'm so curious to know what that clean engine is going to look like in my painted engine bay. But before we can do that, we are next going to have to focus on the suspension, because that needs to be mounted first. So that is what is to come for the next upcoming episode. If you liked what you saw, please give this video a like and consider subscribing, as it really helps me out. I really poured my heart and soul into this one, so it would be nice to get some positive feedback. And also, if you have seen me make any mistakes, or if you have any pointers for me for the next time I'm doing something like this, please let me know in the comment section below. It really helps me out. So I guess that is it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.